have a question for me? I should be happy to answer it.
Right. We do have some more new stuff because there are some characters there's a bit more information about, like, for example, Jill Warwick, and we're gonna start with her. Ties to Mysidia. Dominant of Shiva and dearly beloved of Clive, leader of the New Hideaway. Born a princess of the Northern Territories, visiting Mysidia was like returning to a home she thought long lost. This strange feeling of familiarity became overbearing when she ventured to the Air of Hours, where the ether of the Witch of the North, dominant of Shiva before her, filled the air. Isabel, friend to the moats. Proprietress of the Vale, Northreach's foremost house of ill repute, she shares a long and lasting friendship with Shula, the former offering the latter and her people both material support and opportunities for employment. When Shula confided her interest in recruiting the service of Sid the Outlaw to deliver warriors from his torment, it was Isabel who assisted in arranging an introduction. Well, not really. It was the other one. What was her name? We'll see her in just a bit. Actually, we don't see her. Huh? That's weird. Okay then, and now the modes of water. Starting with Famiel. Shula's younger brother tasked with venturing beyond the wall to secure funds and supplies for the modes of water. Most crucially, the dust crystals that he and the brothers Halleck and Marnik mined from the Sage Spire. After their parents' passing, Famiel was raised by his sister, who elected to put his roguish charm and thirst for adventure to use in service of their community, in return for a solemn pledge that he would keep his true identity a secret. As Warrior's closest living male relative, it was Famiel's responsibility to take the father's role in the child's rite of immersion, which, to the surprise of everyone involved, he handled with aplomb. Halleck, Mode of Water. One of Famiel's familiars and fellow member of the Modes of Water. He and his companion Marnik were tasked with mining dust crystals from the sleeping Sage Spire until the tower awakened, and the two came within a fallen abomination's fingernail of losing their lives. After being saved by Clive and returning to Mysidia, the brothers turned their attentions to assisting their leader's starring turn in Warrior's rite of immersion, somehow coming within a curl's whisker of certain death in their hunt for incense. Marnik, Mode of Water. One of Famiel's familiars and fellow member of the Modes of Water. He and his companion Halleck were tasked with mining dust crystals from the sleeping Sage Spire, a task that came to an inauspicious end when the tower awoke. Though his loose lips and less than lion-hearted nature have the habit of rousing Famiel's ire, his enthusiasm for undertaking any adventure his leader asks of him, whether it be delving deep into a fallen facility to mine crystals or bearding a curl's den for a sample of tree sap, remain constant source of approval. Shula, basic information. A leader of the Modes of Water and author of the letter asking for Sid the Outlaw's aid in rescuing the dominant of Leviathan. That the note was delivered via the Vale suggests that she shares a friendship with the Dame, though the fact that she preferred a tent upon the isolated bluffs far from Northreach for a meeting place over Isabel's establishment implies a need for the greatest secrecy. Tributary. Tributary of Mysidia, final haven of the Modes of Water, desperately seeking a means to free warriors from the prison created for him by her ancestors, she invited Clive and his allies into her hidden home. Though her strength may pale in comparison to that of her dominant guests, she is a skilled warrior in her own right, wielding both a weighty battle axe and the spells of a bearer. New Mother. With Clive's aid, she succeeded in freeing warriors from his temporal prison, returning the child to the great river of life. She swears to care for warriors as if he were her own son, that she might atone for the sins of their forebears, but with the risk that the chaos enveloping the world beyond the wall may one day spread within it ever-present, the future remains clouded for her and her people. And a new hope. Tributary of Mysidia, final haven of the Modes of Water, and elder sister to Famiel, who she raised from a young age after their parents passed away. With her lifelong dream of saving warriors made reality, she did what her forebears did not and welcomed the child into the family by means of the rite of immersion. She promises to care for the boy as if he were her own son, hoping against hope that he will prove a rather less troublemaking charge than her wayward brother. Dominant of Leviathan. The dominant of Leviathan, who Shula would see freed from an 80-year imprisonment. According to the tributary's tale, it was the dominant's summoning of his icon that brought forth the surge, the frozen wave that looms upon the horizon north of Northreach, within which he sleeps even now. Warriors. Basic information. The current dominant of Leviathan, born into the family of the tributary of the Modes of Water some 80 years ago. Soon after his birth and awakening as dominant, he was subjected to a sinister ritual in the hope of harnessing the power that slept inside him. Alas, all did not go to plan. Leviathan ran amok and summoned a wave that would have destroyed Haven, were it not for the second part of his family's plan, freezing the child and the world around him in time. Bitter fate. Said family plotted to transform their new arrival into the heart of a mother crystal by means of forcing his icon to prime and freezing it in time when its ether channeling powers were in full flow. Their plan not only failed to produce a single crystal, but also made of warriors an eternal prisoner, whose release would spell doom for their people, drowned beneath Leviathan's waves. His only hope for freedom would be the coming of one who could remove his icon, or else bested in battle, one such as Clive Rossfield. A rude awakening. Their plan not only failed to produce a single crystal but also made of warriors a prisoner. While recent efforts by Clive and his companions have seen the baby finally freed from his chains, Ultima's untimely involvement has stirred the icon within poor warriors, and now a storm brews anew. Freed. After Clive took on the power of his icon and Shula unwove the spell that froze him in time, Warriors' imprisonment was finally ended. Alas, so was Leviathan's, and with a little encouragement from Ultima, the icon resumed the rampage it had begun decades earlier, forcing Clive to face the maddened serpent in battle. The strength of Ifrit proved just enough to quell Leviathan's rage, allowing an exhausted Clive to return baby Warriors into Shula's loving arms. Rite of Immersion. After Clive and his allies effected his release from a decades-long imprisonment, Shula brought baby Warriors back to Haven, where he was officially and warmly welcomed into the family by means of the rite of immersion. Dalina. Basic information. Adjutant to Shula, tributary of Haven, who ministers to the affairs of the Modes of Water when her leader is otherwise indisposed. It was she who informed the people of Haven of the coming of Clive and his allies, and ensured they would welcome the outsiders as if they were family. Keeper of the Witch's Grave. Adjutant to Shula, tributary of Haven, who ministers to the affairs of the Modes of Water when her leader is otherwise indisposed. Likely to be more often than not, now that Shula has warriors to take care of. Among Dalina's myriad responsibilities is tending the grave of the Witch of the North, a duty passed down to her from her great-grandmother who cared for the woman in her final days and erected the stone after her passing. In a tale known only to the families of Dalina and the tributary, the same ancestor once came across a knight praying before the grave, perhaps the same man who once swore to defend the witch with his life. Pavad, Haven's master craftsman. Though his social skills may be found slightly wanting, his artisanal skills are unquestionable, especially considering the lack of supplies available in the Modes of Water's hidden home. His feelings for his wife Werda, however, are both diverse and abundant. Yamila, once a courtesan at the Vale who ventured beyond the Mysidian glamour to earn much-needed coin for her family. There she fell in love with a sensitive Sunbreaker soul, but knowing that she could never reveal to him her true identity without putting her people in danger, she fled home only to meet with him again in Mysidia. Now she divides her time between cooing with Hervé and caring for her sister, a new mother who has volunteered to be Warriors' wet nurse. Fanit, Mysidia's master of the healing arts who attends to her countrymen's ailments with traditional medicines and charms. Talor proved a particularly difficult patient, as none of the experimental decoctions bubbling away in her kitchens proved effective against a Tonberry curse. Talor, father of Pavad, blacksmith of Haven. In his younger years, Talor was one of the chosen few permitted to travel beyond Mysidia's borders to trade with the outside world. Alas, on one ill-fated trip, he was arrested by the Gregorian Inquisition and tortured as a heretic. When the sight of Clive's longsword reopened those old wounds, he made an offering of his Gregorian Maternoster to a Tonberry altar, hoping to bring a curse upon those who had terrorized him so many years earlier. Rowan, a trader in all matters chocobo who works out of Martha's Rest. It was he who gifted Ambrosia, or Whiteheart as he knew her, with the riding tag she wears to this day. He is equally generous when it comes to bird food, sharing the mimid gourd Clive needed to keep Ambrosia calm on the journey to Mysidia without thought of recompense. And the Witch of the North, a woman of the Northern Territories who breathed her last some 80 years ago. She had been employed by the Northern Thanes to weave a spell to stop time that they might prevent the fall of Drake's Eye and hence their nation. When at last she perfected the spell, it was already too late to save the Mother Crystal, or the witch, her flesh nigh consumed by the crystal's curse. It was in this state, close to death and abandoned by her people, that the Motes of Water stumbled upon her. They cared for her as best as they could, and in return for their kindness, she gifted them her spell. Dominant of Shiva. She had been employed by the Northern Thanes to weave a spell to stop time that they might prevent the fall of Drake's Eye. Though the plan failed, the ware she designed to cast it remains atop the air of hours to this day, as does her ether, bearing the unmistakable signature of a Dominant of Shiva. And Isai, Mysidian Savior, a woman of the Northern Territories and Dominant of Shiva before Jill, who breathed her last some 80 years ago. She had been employed by the Northern Thanes to weave a spell to stop time that they might prevent the fall of Drake's Eye. To this end, they brought her to Mysidia, where she labored night and day to perfect the magic that might save her nation, watched over all the while by a knight whose thoughts were only ever of protecting his lady. And on we go, lay of the land. The Vale, friend to the Motes. The Vale's owner and proprietor, Isabel, has long sought to provide her unique brand of succor to all who seek it, and as such she welcomes into her halls those from all walks of life, be they noble or lowborn, serf or soldier. This hospitality extends to even the exiled Motes of Water. Showing sympathy with their plight, the dame happily offers what assistance she can, be it aid, protection, or employment. The Northern Territories' history. Once home to a handful of small but proud nations, the northern reaches of Storm are now almost entirely lost to the Blight, her people forced from their ancestral homes to find refuge in Velastia's more hospitable climes. The region's downfall can be attributed to the fall of its only mother crystal, Drake's Eye, some 80 years past. While a last-ditch attempt was made to save the crystal by having Shiva's Dominant freeze it in time, her efforts ended in failure. The ruling Thanes turned their eyes south to Rosaria for a new source of power, and while their first forays were met with success, they proved no match for the might of the duchy and were ultimately pacified by Archduke Elwin Rosfield's armies. Drake's Horn, Motes of Water. A mother crystal which once stood in southern ash. For generations, the lands surrounding it were inhabited by a peaceful people known as Motes of Water. However, the fall of Drake's Horn 300 years ago left Drake's Spine the only mother crystal on the continent and sparked a decades-long conflict for control of its ethereal bounty. The Motes, their homelands fast being consumed by the Blight and unable to compete against the warring tribes, chose to adopt a nomadic lifestyle, which would continue for the next 2 centuries. Drake's Eye, Fall. A mother crystal which once stood in the frozen wastes of Northern Storm, lands now lost to the Blight. Before its fall, some 80 winters past, the ruling Thanes charged their Dominant of Ice to devise an incantation that would effectively freeze time around the crystal, preventing its fall. Yet while the Dominant succeeded in creating the spell, it was too little too late, and Drake's Eye shattered not long after, sending the region into chaos. Mysidia. Basic information. Long thought lost to the Blight, Mysidia is in fact one of the last few regions in the former Northern Territories that remains lush and teeming with life. Though one might not believe so when viewing it from across oil-faced bay. This is solely due to a powerful magical glamour erected by its residents, the Motes of Water, to make the lands appear to be dead from the outside and thus discourage unwanted visitors. A century passed. The region was abandoned almost a century ago, following a failed attempt by the ruling Thanes to cast a spell that might halt the decay of their mother crystal, Drake's Eye, only to be claimed by the Motes of Water but a few years later. Order restored. This remote corner of Velastia was once home to thousands of northerners who maintained an expansive religious complex dedicated to the worship of Shiva. Following a failed attempt to devise and conjure a spell that would prevent the Mother Crystal Drake's eye from cracking, the location was abandoned by all, save an ailing witch who died a short time later. Why the people of the North might abandon a region that had yet to succumb to the Blight remains a mystery, but decades of subsequent assaults on Rosarian lands suggest that the Thanes sought strength in numbers by consolidating remaining populations near the ducal border. Several years after the Northerners' departure, the Motes of Water claimed the land for their own, establishing a small village and casting a glamour about the region that made it appear to have already succumbed to the Deadlands. With their supply of crystals that powered the glamour now dwindling, the Motes now must look to restoring their ties with the outside world. The Surge. Basic information. A towering wave seemingly frozen in time for the past 80 years, due to its sudden appearance off Mysidia's Cape Neptune immediately following the fall of Drake's Eye, scholars generally presume the two occurrences are related. If Shula, tributary of the Motes of Water, is to be believed, however, the wave was not only summoned by Leviathan the Lost, but that the icon's dominant still slumbers within it. Forbidden Rites. According to Shula, a tributary of the Modes of Water, the wave was not only summoned by Leviathan the Lost, but that the icon's dominant lies trapped within, victim of a terrible ritual that sought to harness his power. Hidden Truth. It was summoned by the icon of water, Leviathan, when the Modes of Water sought to sacrifice the baby Warriors, Leviathan's newborn dominant, in an attempt to create their own mother crystal. Before the wave could swallow Mysidia, the Modes cast a counterspell to stop time, effectively freezing both water and child, but damning poor warriors to an endless slumber. A rude awakening. Now with the counterspell weakened, its hold has grown precarious. While the surge still stands, the seas around it have grown rough, the skies dark, the child has awoken, and within him, the serpent. A child unbound. Warriors has since been freed from his temporal bonds, but the spell remains active, focused on the surge for fear of what might happen to Mysidia should the wave be released. The Air of Hours. Basic information. Atop one of the region's highest peaks sits this ancient stone temple, awash in the glow of a mysterious blue light. From a magicked artifact in its innermost sanctum known as the Vare, shines a bright ray of time-altering light that extends across the forest canopy down to Cape Neptune and the Surge. Frozen in time. Within its timeless halls is housed the Vare, a magical conduit through which ice-aspected ether is channeled and focused onto the seas of Cape Neptune, effectively halting the flow of time in that precise location as well as in the temple itself. And Northern culture. It is believed that the structure may have once been a place of worship where the ancient peoples of the North made offerings to the icon Shiva. While the now famous Witch of the North used the temple during her research into the development of chronomancy, the Air of Hours did not get its name, however, until the magical Vare contained within halls was used by the Modes of Water to halt Leviathan's rampage and seal him within the Surge. Haven. Basic information. An idyllic village situated in the center of one of the North's last remaining woodlands. Here live the Modes of Water, a tribe originally hailing from Ash, having only arrived in the region in the last century. A wooden palisade encompasses their isolated community to provide protection from the region's myriad beasts and beastmen. History. A small village situated in the center of Mysidia. The Modes of Water, who established the current settlement nearly a century ago, found their new homes amongst the ruins of pre-existing stone architecture. To ensure the existence of their people remains unknown, only a handful of Haven's residents are ever permitted to leave the village, and even then usually only for the purpose of trade. Hidden Truth. The village has long been hidden from the outside world by a powerful glamour that Haven's residents maintained with a network of stone cairns filled with crystal shards. Now, however, with crystal in short supply, the Modes and their newly freed dominant warriors must prepare for the day that glamour fades. Cloaktop. Access to the village of Haven is limited to this narrow, poorly kept path that, following a punishing ascent, skirts the edge of the Lost Cloak, where peril oft awaits those who pay more attention to the breathtaking vistas than they do the path beneath their feet. Father's Fell. A strand of primeval forest, its name given by the Modes of Water whose fathers and grandfathers first felled the trees there to fortify Haven. Village woodcutters still visit the area to this day, careful not to over-harvest and always mindful to replant. Village trappers also frequent the area to take advantage of its abundant game that provides Haven with a source of meat and pelts to trade in Northreach. Tailwind Bay. While technically the western edge of Oilifized Bay, this stretch of calm ocean off Mysidia's eastern coast earned the name Tailwind after Leviathan primed here 80 winters past and laid waste to the shoreline with a thrashing of his mighty tail fin. Maiden's March. There was once a time long ago when young women of the north would make pilgrimages to massive temple complexes dedicated to the worship of Shiva. Here they would walk the path of ice and stand before the sacred altars to place their offerings and receive the icon's blessings. River's Meat. So severe was Leviathan's wrath 80 years ago that much of Mysidia's terrain was forever altered. From the sea rushed in a wall of water, toppling trees, cutting new canyons, and swallowing homes. When the waters finally receded, the land was unrecognizable. Lakes where there had been none, rivers joined where once they had been separate. The sunken ruins of River's Meat is one such place. Langur Falls. A magnificent waterfall overlooking the ruins of an ancient northern settlement. It was here the baby Warrior's mother, unable to bear the pain of losing her son to sacrifice, took her life, casting herself off the cataract's lip and into the rocks below. A trace of her life ether, however, must have remained as her son's Egi Thalius was inexplicably drawn to this very spot over 80 winters later. The modes of water still visit the location annually to pay their respects. The Lost Cloak. Basic information. The towering cliffs that stretch along the border between Sunbreak and the Northern Territories are known as the Lost Cloak, the Giant's Cloak, or simply the Cloak, and earn their name from their appearance, that of a mantle draped over the shoulders of a mighty titan. And Sculpted Skies. For nearly a century, the region has been enshrouded in a magical glamour, making it appear simply another stretch of empty deadlands and discouraging all from approach. And Oilifized Bay. Stretching west from the former holy capital of Oriflamme, Oilifized Bay was, until recently, utilized by northern Thanes to raid the wheat and rye fields of Royal Meadows. To prevent such unwanted incursions into imperial lands, the Empire lined the coast with watchtowers from Moor to Northreach. However, as the Blight swallowed more and more of the north, forcing the Thanes into isolated pockets, the frequency of these raids trickled to almost nothing, and now only a handful of the towers remain. On we go. Mysteries of the Realm. Icon. 8 elements. Shattered aspects of Ultima's power given flash by human hosts. 8 elemental fragments were intended to test and bolster Mythos' strength, but one of their number, Leviathan the Lost, was forsaken by its master, judged to have been so profaned by mankind that it could no longer serve its original purpose. Clive, however, was able to draw out the final icon's power from the infant warriors, bringing Ultima's vessel to its full and perfect form. The Glamour. Basic information. An ethereal dome woven by the modes of water to shield their hidden home from prying eyes. While the land within teems with life, to an outside observer it appears as if it has been lost to the Blight. Passing through the wall is a disorienting experience akin to a sudden rush of alcoholic intoxication. A tailored sky. From the outside it appears as if the land has been lost to the Blight, yet from the inside blue skies soar over lush forests teeming with life. History. It has its origins in the magic walls of a much smaller scale that the modes of water would conjure to disguise their camps during their years of wandering through the foreign lands of Storm. On settling in Mysidia, they elected to cast a similar spell over the entire land, crafting their crystal-filled cairns and laboring night and day to attune the spell that the outside world might see the area slowly succumb to the Blight. And Dusk Crystals. It is maintained by a series of ether-channeling cairns filled with shards of dusk crystal mined from the Sage Spire. Now that the Magitech Mother Crystal is no more, the modes of water have only a small stockpile of dusk crystals remaining to sustain the glamour. It is but a matter of time before their supplies are exhausted and their curtain finally falls. Chronomancy. Basic information. The secret of controlling the flow of time by means of ethereal manipulation. It was devised and perfected by the Witch of the North, who was tasked by the Thanes of the Northern Territories with finding a way to stall or prevent the fall of Drake's Eye. After a lifetime of toil, she finally perfected the spell some 80 years ago, but it was too late to save their doomed mother crystal. The modes of water would later put it to another, more sinister purpose, that of creating a new mother crystal by freezing their baby dominant in time. Alas, that plan too resulted in failure, the witches' magics succeeding only in preventing the extermination of their people by an icon's fury. Hidden truth. It was devised and perfected by the Witch of the North, a dominant of Shiva, whose mastery over the element of ice extended even to the freezing of time. She taught the secret of her spell to the modes of water, who cared for her in her dying days. Alas, it brought them only pain, their attempt to create a new mother crystal ending with the tributary's child trapped in time, unable to be freed lest Leviathan's fury destroy them all. Some 80 years later, Shula and Jill worked together to unweave the magic from around Volias, letting the child live again at long last. Glamour cairns. Basic information. Glowing pillars of stacked stone found scattered around Mysidia. The crystals within them maintain the glamour that keeps the land hidden. They do so through a constant channeling of ether, much as municipal shards fire forges, fill wells, and light lamps elsewhere in the realm. Maintenance. Constant maintenance is required to ensure that the spell does not fade, both in the replacement of spent shards and in the careful attunement of the flow of ether through them. The latter duty is one only a bearer can discharge. Another reason why the modes of water embrace those born with the gift. And dusk crystals. They are filled with dusk crystals mined from the Sage Spire, the magic they channel maintaining the glamour that keeps the land hidden. Given the dusk crystal's fragility, replacing shattered fragments is an unending task, as is carefully attuning the flow of ether through them. The skill with which the bearers of Haven have handled this onerous duty for generations is another reason why those born with their gift are embraced by their fellow modes of water. The Vare. Basic information. The magical apparatus by which the spell freezing Volias and the surge in time was cast and continues to be sustained. It was erected in the Air of Hours, the temple that sits upon Mysidia's highest peak, the only place that offered an unbroken line of sight at Drake's Eye, where the spell was originally intended to be cast. Hidden truth. At its heart sits an immense shard of crystal cut from Drake's Eye, through which the magic has been ceaselessly channeled for 80 years. The Vare was designed and built by the Witch of the North, who imbued her own ether within it. On Clive's approach, a spectral knight materialized before it, wielding a blade of ice and determined to prevent the passage of anyone who would undo her spell. Whether this spectre was a fragment of the witch's power or a melding of her ether and another's remains an open question. The modes of water. Basic information. The people among whom the dominant of Leviathan is born, notable for their ivory hair and sapphire eyes. Histories agree that their bloodline was ended some 100 or more years ago, the icon that swims within it forever lost to the world. Mysidia. Their history begins in the lands surrounding Drake's Horn in southern Ash. After the fall of the Mother Crystal, their people set out in search of a safe haven, wandering through the alien lands of Storm for decades until they found a new home in the unclaimed land of Mysidia. Their long history of common struggle having united their people as one, bearers of the modes of water are esteemed equally to their less blessed brethren. A life of persecution. The people among whom the dominant of Leviathan is born, who fled from southern Ash after the fall of Drake's Horn. Their wanderings took them to Eastern Storm, where they were persecuted as heretics by the nascent Gregorian Inquisition and driven to the brink of extinction. The few survivors fled north and west, where they found a safe haven in Mysidia. Alas, their attempts to revive their people's fortunes by harnessing the power of Leviathan to create a new Mother Crystal ended in tragedy. The babe that was to be their savior frozen in an unending torment. A New Dawn. After years of wandering through the unwelcoming lands of Storm, they finally found a second home in Mysidia. Though the tributary of the Times attempt to revive his people's fortunes by harnessing the power of Leviathan to create a new Mother Crystal may have been an unforgivable sin, it was not an irreversible one, as Shula and Clive proved when they delivered Volias from his 80-year imprisonment, reuniting the family at long last. Elder's Blessings. Originally native to southern Ash, these flowers flourish on the banks of freshwater streams. their stems yielding fine yet durable fibers and their petals a lasting blue dye. They have long been treasured by the motes of water as both crafting material and symbol of their tribe. When Drake's horn fell and their long years of exile began, the tributary of the time ordered that the seeds of the flowers be harvested, that their people might plant them wherever they stopped to water, bringing a piece of home to the foreign lands through which they wandered. The Gregorian Inquisition. In the early days of Gregorian supremacy in Eastern Storm, some 170 years ago, the clergy conducted an inquisition into all heretical thought that might challenge their rule. Their mission swept across the region, demanding all renounce their idolatrous folk beliefs and swear an eternal and exclusive allegiance to the goddess. Those who would or could not, the motes of water chief among them, were slaughtered en masse to serve as a lesson to the rest of the populace. It proved an effective one, and the Holy Empire of Sambrek, ruled over by the corporeal embodiment of Great Griga herself, was established soon after. Berkshus wine. Depending on who you ask, Berkshus wine is either some ambrosial delight distilled by the gods themselves, or a fantasy woven by vintners and liquormongers of ill repute to separate the thirsty masses from their hard-earned coin. The truth, however, is somewhere in between. While Bacchius wine does in fact exist, it is only produced on the continent and therefore will command a king's ransom in those few high-end inns and brothels that actually manage to procure a bottle. As such, demand well exceeds supply, forcing innkeepers around the realm to find alternatives that will satisfy their patrons' want for the occasional recherche drop. This is frequently accomplished by blending a variety of lesser quality vintages, the result being not only questionable flavor, but also a tendency to induce some of the most severe headaches outside of a battle hammer to the face. And the rite of immersion. A traditional ceremony of the motes of water used to welcome newborn babies into the family. It calls for 3 ministrators, the child's mother and father or closest living male and female relative, and a trusted guardian to serve as witness, most often the tributary of the time. The latter is responsible for collecting 3 phials of holy water with which the infant's head is anointed, representing the course of the great river of life to which the new raindrop is to be joined. And the Bestiary. Shiva before Jill. The Warden of Ice, of whom Jill Warwick is the current dominant. All dominants of Shiva are born among the descendants of the Motes of Ice, including Jill's predecessor in the role, the Witch of the North, who devised the spell to freeze time. Her ether yet lingers in the Vare she constructed atop the air of hours in Mysidia. Leviathan the Lost. Legend. Despite the prominence of the dominants and their icons in modern politics and warfare, recent history makes no mention of an icon of water. So long has it been, in fact, since Leviathan last appeared in Valistia that he is now almost exclusively referred to as the Lost. As to where exactly he went, though, no one is quite certain. Basic information. So long has it been since the icon of water last appeared in Valistia that many have forgotten Leviathan even existed, despite much evidence to the contrary. Old writings clearly speak of dominants past summoning great whale-like creatures capable of swallowing entire cities with their gaping maws. Visual records such as the famed Circle of Malleus tapestry also exist, depicting the icon as a giant serpent alongside its elemental brethren. Leviathan. Hidden truth. 80 years ago, a baby was born to the motes of water, a dominant, the first to awaken after decades of silence. Yet rather than embrace this miracle, they instead chose to use him for their own gain, subjecting him to a torturous rite that stirred the serpent slumbering inside him. Fearing the destruction of their village at the hands of an enraged icon, the motes cast a spell on the child, imprisoning him within time itself, where he remains trapped to this day, his anger stayed but not soothed. And corruption. 80 years ago, the motes of water committed a sin most atrocious. They attempted to sacrifice a baby dominant with designs to create their own mother crystal, and in doing so corrupted both his body and mind. Unaccepting of this taint inflicted by mankind on his once perfect creation, Ultima spurned the child, leaving him to his cruel fate while turning his eyes to another. Pericos. Pericles was first encountered by Clive following his attempt at absorbing Leviathan's ether. Sensing danger, Leviathan's dominant, the baby warriors, summoned forth the Abyss, sending a cataract of salt and spray at Clive and his companions. And though they did miss their mark, from one of these stray gouts emerged a horrible creature possessed of features both human and piscine. Able to call upon the seas as did her creator, this ethereal surrogate, or Egi, as their kind have oft been called, harried Clive until he succeeded in putting her down. Thalius. A corporeal manifestation of the dominant warriors' fear and anguish, this waterbound elemental, or Egi, carved a trail of slaughter through Mysidia's primeval wood before arriving at the foot of Langor Falls. According to the people of Haven, it was here that the baby's mother was said to have taken her life upon learning her son's fate. Tonberries. Basic information. A race of beastmen native to the Northern Territories. While distinguishing features include dark green skin, an unnaturally round head, and a slightly hunched gait, Tonberries are probably best known for their unhealthy obsession with vengeance and the unnaturally sharp knives they carry to exact it. Slighting a Tonberry, even in the most insignificant of manners, will plant a foul seed in its heart that over time will take root and grow, driving the Tonberry to madness that can only be stemmed with murder. And should you harm one of its kin, prepare to face the rancor of the entire tribe. And rancor. Vengeance is a central fixture in Tonberry culture, with societal value apparently being placed on the number of individual grudges a Tonberry accumulates over its lifetime. As such, most older tribe members are admired or even revered by their younger peers. Mysidian folklore suggests that one might redirect the rancor of these creatures to a personal enemy, or curse him, by leaving an offering on one of their many stone altars. This, however, can come at the risk of being cursed yourself, should the enemy already be dead. Tonberry King. Tonberry kings are not of noble blood, nor do they rule over their tribe. They are simply those individuals who have survived long enough to accumulate significant amounts of rancor. Their hearts stained black with rage, these elders tend to be not only the most violent and bloodthirsty of their kin, but also the strongest and most nimble. Despite their advanced years, some believe that one may curse his enemy by making an offering to these kings, but science would suggest this is pure fancy. Reitmar. Since man first settled the untamed north, he has known not to journey too deep into the Black Forests, for 3 giants roam, namely giant lizards. With scales as hard there's an S missing, hard as steel, okay. With scales as hard as steel, maws deeper than the deepest of wells, and a fleetness of foot that belies their enormous size, these aberrations of nature rightly stand at the summit of predation. When the blight began consuming their habitat, however, a lack of prey drove many of the creatures south into Rosaria and beyond, leaving only the strongest and most terrible to lord over what little of the north remained. And lastly, the Timekeeper. Basic information. Clad in iron from head to toe, the Timekeeper serves as both guardian of the air of hours and watcher of the Vare, defending his charge with both mighty sword and malevolent sorcery, bending time as a Cooper might a bilge hoop and descending on his victims before they can react. And the Witch. Before the Timekeeper became guardian of the Vare, he was a northern bannerman in service of the dominant of ice, XVI. When the spell ultimately failed and the Thanes turned their attentions to their ill-starred assault on Rosaria, the two were separated, and when he returned to Mysidia to stand with his lady once more, it was too late. Yet still he remained, loyal to the last, having pledged both life and afterlife to his lady, his spirit empowered with her song. And that was all the lore of Final Fantasy XVI throughout my whole playthrough.